If you're a fan of vampires, then this is the video for you. And trust me, it's been a long time coming. There are literally dozens and dozens of vampire franchises. I'm talking books, movies, games, plays, you name any form of content, and the vampire has most likely featured in it one way or another. So I thought it was time for the absolute ultimate vampire compilation. Time to rank the 50 most powerful vampires of all time across all franchises. With that being said, we have got a big list to go through, so let's kick it off with number 50, Nosferatu. Coming in at number 50, we have one of the most iconic vampires of all time, but he's not the most powerful. Nosferatu, known as Count Orlok, really has that old gothic Victorian kind of depiction of what a vampire should look like. Bald, pale skin, elongated limbs, and the very familiar two front fangs that protrude from his mouth. The movie depicts him moving his body and contorting it in unusual ways, playing to the benefits of darkness and shadows. He never really had the charisma and allure of Dracula, but was portrayed more as a cursed individual who brought plague with his presence, and you almost pity him at one point. I know many of you may not agree with me placing him at number 50, but in terms of outright power, he's ranked correctly in my opinion. Following on from Nosferatu, we have David from The Lost Boys coming in at number 49. The Lost Boys is one of the most iconic vampire movies of the 80s and was responsible for a resurgence in the interest in vampire culture after its release. Speaking of iconic, nobody can forget the bleach blonde mullet and trench coat that David wore in The Lost Boys. He was the personification of cool, with his level-headed, almost arrogant persona. David was the leader of his coven, who ruled the Santa Carla Pier at night. He tried to lure protagonist Michael into his faction, but the latter's refusal ended in a fight to the death between the two. David was extremely strong, quick, agile, but more so fearless than ever, which is what made him so dangerous. Even though he's ranked at 49, if there was a list for the coolest vampire, David would certainly take top spot. Speaking of bleach blonde vampires, anyone who grew up in the 90s or even later couldn't forget Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The English-born vampire who comes in at number 48 gave Buffy a torrid time in the early seasons of the show, and even has 2 successful Slayer kills on his belt. Spike's age meant he was extremely powerful and not a vampire to be messed with. He transitioned from enemy to accomplice before eventually falling in love with Buffy. This really opened Spike as a character, and we got to see just how far a vampire will go for love, even being willing to give up his own immortality. Spike, like many characters on this list, is such an iconic individual and is cemented in vampire nostalgia. Following on at number 47, we have Lena from Underworld. Now, some of you might be surprised at Lena being on this list, but honestly, she was one of the first vampires that came to mind. Lena is a vampire from the Nordic tribe. She has the ability to transfer her consciousness into the spiritual realm, which allows her to learn new abilities and return a more powerful vampire. With her ability, she is faster and more agile than most vampires, able to move even faster than a vampire's line of eyesight. She becomes one of the new vampire elders at the conclusion of Blood Wars. Lena was also instrumental in unlocking Celine's power in order to make her strong enough to defeat Marius. Next up, we're heading over to Salem's Lot, and we're looking at Kurt Barlow, who comes in at number 46. Now, Barlow really stands out to me because his entire appearance in the 1979 Salem's Lot movie was based on that of Nosferatu. It almost looks like a mirror image when you compare the two. So Kurt moved to Jerusalem's Lot in order to start a vampire colony of his own. He is an extremely old and ancient vampire, immensely powerful, and his influence and success rate sees the entire town almost overrun with vampirism. Barlow is as iconic as he is powerful. His image is synonymous with the Salem's Lot story and movie, even eclipsing later remakes of the book. I struggled with his placement on this list because every vampire is pretty powerful. Let me know if you disagree with this placement, but I believe it's accurate enough. Coming in at number 45, we have the living vampire, Michael Morbius. Once an incredibly talented biochemist, Morbius was stricken with a rare blood disease in his childhood. Through untested and dangerous experiments involving vampire bats, Morbius was unwillingly transformed into a vampire, absorbing traits of the vampire bat and an undead-like creature in terms of physicality. In order to keep his blood disease in remission, Morbius has to feed on human blood. He is incredibly strong, fast, agile, and can launch his body with such force that he can maintain unsupported flight. Despite being viewed as an antagonist, Morbius still withholds a high sense of morality. Following Morbius, we have Eli Damascus coming in at number 44 from the Blade 2 movie. Eli is one of the oldest vampires in existence during the film's events, and despite his frail appearance, he is a very, very powerful vampire. The thing is, he doesn't care much for displaying his physical power. He cares more for maintaining his existence or self-preservation. He was behind the creation of a new vampire race with the intent to eradicate the current generation's weaknesses in order to be able to defeat Blade once and for all. Damascus was not above sacrificing anyone if it meant his plan would be successful, even his own daughter. He was quickly killed by his own genetic son, Jared Nomak, but still remains as one of the most powerful vampires on this list. 30 Days of Night is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated vampire movies of all time. So it's only fitting that one of the vampires from the movie makes this list, and I have to add, rightly so. Coming in at number 43, Marlowe is cold, emotionless, and extremely feral, which just adds to his intimidating presence. He is the leader of the vampires who arrive at Barrow to feast without restriction for the next 30 days. His physical appearance is absolutely terrifying, with his razor-sharp fangs and coal, jet-black eyes. He displays a relentless approach to hunting down every last human in the town, and like the film, Marlowe is a very underrated vampire. Next up, we've got Benjamin from Twilight coming in at number 42. Part of the Egyptian coven and kept relatively closeted by coven leader Amun, Benjamin has the ability to manipulate the four elements: earth, wind, water, and fire. He can bend all of them to his will, kind of like Avatar, but he drinks blood. He is the only vampire with such a gift, and despite his talents being successfully hidden by Amun, Benjamin came onto Arrow's radar following the confrontation with the Cullens in Breaking Dawn. He rejected Arrow's invite, however. Because of Benjamin's unique abilities, it makes him one of the most powerful vampires in existence. We are sticking with Twilight for number 41, with Alice Cullen taking that spot. Alice is one of the most powerful vampires from the entire series, and she has the gift of foresight, meaning she can see variations of certain outcomes long before they happen. This is, as we know, extremely beneficial, and unlike Benjamin, Alice has been on Arrow's radar for a very long time. Alice is quick, strong, agile, and a very skillful fighter. She was instrumental in the survival of the Cullens, identifying the Volturi's plans to travel to Forks to confront them over the then perceived creation of an immortal child in Renesmee. Moving on from Twilight, we have Damon Salvatore from The Vampire Diaries coming in at number 40 on our list of the most powerful vampires. Damon is over 150 years old, or 500 years old if we go by the books, but as it's been shown time and time again, he is a ruthless, vicious, and pretty unforgiving vampire. He was one of the few who genuinely enjoyed being a vampire and embraced all aspects of the immortal life. Damon begins the series as the antagonist before turning kind of good guy, before then going bad guy and then good guy and then bad guy again. Anyway, before eventually giving up his immortality for Elena, a girl he actually stole from his brother Stefan. Who could ever forget the Vampire King of Mississippi, Russell Edgington, coming in at number 39. Russell was an incredibly powerful vampire, and he used his abilities to influence history over the centuries, and in recent years enjoys a rather comfortable life. He's more of a person you don't cross or piss off, as it normally takes him being properly challenged in order to bring out his ruthless side. And if you've watched the show, we end up seeing his ruthless side as he sacrifices his morality after the murder of his partner. Russell is just over 2,800 years old, making him one of the earliest vampires to ever exist, and also one of the most powerful. So next up, we're stopping over at Underworld for number 38 with Eve Corvin. Yeah, okay, technically she's a hybrid, but in saying that, she's certainly more vampiric due to her father also having vampire genetics alongside her mother Selene. Expanding on that, she is the most potent of immortals, possessing powerful attributes from each species as well as ferocity and bloodlust. Eve demonstrates a bestial blood rage when she reveals her true nature. This seems to be what triggers her power, as she does not possess any hand-to-hand training or combat experience, relying on pure brute force to defend herself. Following on at number 37, we have Abigail. Now, the image of a child vampire is absolutely terrifying, and Abigail just takes it up a notch. I mean, for visuals alone, this character's aura is nailed on. I was really impressed with the movie and enjoyed a fresh take on the vampire, especially having her so young. Abigail has it all: superhuman strength, speed, mind control, telepathy, durability, flight. Well, she can levitate, so I guess that means flight if she expands on that ability. I know she's relatively new in terms of appearing on the big screen, but she definitely deserves to be on this list for her sheer power alone. She's also very clever and uses her childlike appearance in order to hunt her prey, and what's more is, she enjoys it. So we're heading over to my favorite vampire franchise, The Vampire Chronicles, for number 36, and we have Maharet taking that spot. Maharet is one of the oldest and most ancient vampires to ever exist in the Chronicles and in general, having lived for the past 6,000 years. She prides herself on being the only vampire to ever endure immortality to the fullest extent, never taking to the earth to sleep for centuries or allowing herself to turn to a marble-like statue, just as Akasha and Enkil did. She spent those 6,000 years fully awake, protecting the family bloodline. Maharet is extremely strong, powerful, and possesses the mind and fire gifts. She is so old that she predates the term vampire, being called blood drinker. It was only centuries later that the word vampire was actually coined. Of course, we're staying with the Vampire Chronicles for number 35 with Marius de Romanis, following on from Maharet. Now, Marius is one of the most powerful vampires from the book series, and you might wonder why he's placed above Maharet despite him being 4,000 years younger. Well, that's due to his relationship with Akasha, aka the Queen of the Damned. Marius tended to Akasha and Enkil while they lay in a trance-like state. They simply refused to do anything. Marius quickly learned that the entire vampire race was connected to their safety and well-being. He drank from Akasha on numerous occasions while in this state and absorbed a lot of her powerful traits, including her strength. This, in turn, makes Marius a more powerful vampire than Maharet, and just a very powerful vampire in general. In at number 34, we have the only vampire to ever appear in The Lord of the Rings, as J.R.R. Tolkien didn't really have much interest in the undead blood drinkers. Thuring Weithil served as Sauron's messenger during the First Age. she could shapeshift into the form of a bat, leading many to think she was actually a skin changer. She had at least 2 great dark fingered wings with a ghostly appearance and an iron claw at the end of each joint. She was very quick, agile, and her strongest ability was her stealth, so she could shapeshift at will. I have to admit, upon researching this list, I had no idea that a vampire existed in the world of Tolkien, but what I can say is Thuringwethil was extremely powerful. So guys, the first rendition of Dracula comes in at number 33, which is of course Dracula from the Van Helsing movie. This vampire took his base from the original Dracula story and had this weird kind of ponytail that didn't really suit the character, but we're talking about his power and he had a lot of it, despite being overly dramatic the entire film. He was immensely strong, had mind control, and could transform into an intimidating large winged, bat-like creature that enhanced his already powerful traits even further. Dracula's biggest distraction was his determination to create children, more of his kind, purely made from vampires, but they would not survive despite his best efforts. This distraction made him even more aggressive, and he became relentless in achieving his goal. Coming in at number 32, we have one of the coolest, most laid-back vampires to ever grace our TV screens, Eric Northman, the vampire sheriff of Area 5, Louisiana. Eric spent the majority of his time in his vampire nightclub, Fantasia, even fashioning himself a nice throne to sit upon as he overlooked the club. Having existed for 1,000 years, Eric is the oldest and strongest vampire of Louisiana. Not many, if any, would have dared to challenge him. He reports back to the Vampire Authority and eventually gains a place on the new Vampire Council as the seasons progress. His biggest strength is his mind, as Eric always chose when and how to pick a fight, which showed him a lot of success without being killed. Definitely deserves his place on this list, and as you can see, I've placed him at number 32, but what's your ranking? Let me know down below. Barnabas Collins was once the human heir to the Collins fortune and its booming fishing port, until he was cursed by the vengeful witch Angelique for rejecting his romantic advances. Coming in at number 31, his physicality changed more than anything when he became a vampire, more so than most franchises. Barnabas had the typical strengths that come with becoming a vampire, but what makes him so stand out was his relentlessness to achieve happiness at all costs. He embraced feeding on humans as he viewed it necessary for his survival, and showed little compassion when doing so. Despite the TV series concluding in the 70s, an enjoyable remake starring Johnny Depp was released in 2012. The alpha vampire from Supernatural comes in at number 30, and despite being a big fan of Supernatural, it's been so long since I've watched it, I forgot all about this absolute powerhouse of a vampire. In the Supernatural series, the alpha vampire was the progenitor of the vampire race, the first of his kind. He had an extremely high level of invulnerability, could communicate telepathically with every single vampire in existence. He was faster, stronger, and more powerful than any other vampire alive. He established vampire nests among the planet, believing his race were always stronger together rather than individually. He was killed by the Colt gun, the only item in existence that could actually harm him. In at number 29, we have good old vampire Bill Compton from True Blood. Bill was basically the face of the series as it revolved almost entirely around his romantic affair with Sookie Stackhouse. Bill was a rather reserved character, and he didn't like to showcase his power all that often. That was until it came to protecting Sookie. Bill had all the pretty standard vampire powers that come with the package, until that is, he consumed the entire vial of Lilith's blood. This transforms him into an unkillable, all-powerful super vampire who basically answers to nobody. In this state, there's not one person that could even remotely match old vampire Bill, and it was only through his own decision to end his life did he then lose such a power. Next up at number 28 we have Radu Vladislas, and a lot of you might be sitting there thinking, well, who the hell is this guy? Radu is from the Subspecies series and is one seriously powerful vampire. Born from King Vladislas and an evil sorceress who cursed and corrupted the king. From this, Radu had little to no respect for human life and took his victims with relative ease. Immensely powerful, strong and unforgiving, there was no stopping Radu. From the remnants of the curse, Radu even killed his own father, stabbing him in the chest in order to claim a mystical relic known as the Bloodstone. Coming in at number 27, we have one of the most fearsome, vicious, ruthless and most memorable vampires of all time, Jared Nomak from Blade 2. He was the first of a new super breed of vampire known as a Reaper. Reapers were stronger, faster, more agile and far more durable than the standard vampire from the series. Nomak's genetics were altered and mutated to the point that his body's regenerative system was attacking itself, meaning that Nomak was destined to die. Knowing this and feeling extremely vengeful, he caused havoc among the vampire race, creating as many Reapers as possible in order to wipe out the entirety of the race itself. His design was an early influence for the Strigoi vampires of the series, The Strain. We're jumping back to the Underworld franchise for number 26 as David takes that spot. The pure-born son of vampire elder Amelia and her lover Thomas, another ancient vampire, David was the only rightful heir to the Eastern Coven. He was a believer in the old ways and wanted to resurrect the vampire species to more than just hiding in the shadows for survival. Although being a highly skilled fighter, he was never trained as a death dealer, but was also capable of using rational thought when it was most beneficial. He killed the traitor vampire Samira despite her having consumed Celine's blood, and he took his place as one of the new elders of the United Covens at the end of Blood Wars. So guys, we're halfway through the list and we come to one of the coolest, most feral vampires to ever exist. Black Hat takes the number 25 spot on this list, and rightly so. The first human to ever be turned into a vampire, Black Hat acts as the Vampire Queen's general and controls the army in their attacks on humans. Once a devoted and highly skilled priest, before he was captured, Black Hat now used his knowledge of the priesthood against the faction. As the first human-made vampire, Black Hat is vicious, unforgiving, and extremely powerful, even outfighting and killing several priests who attempted to stop him. Pretty underrated vampire if you ask me. Following on from Black Hat, we have Jane coming in at number 24, and I think it's safe to say that this is a vampire we are all very familiar with. Jane was turned relatively young, no more than 12 years old, and has the power to inflict a burning pain all over a victim's body with just a mere thought. Because of that, it's near impossible to face her head on, as you won't get close enough to even leave a scratch. As a member of the Volori Guard, she is highly thought of by leader Arrow and considered his most prized asset alongside her brother Alec. She was also crucial in establishing the Volturi's dominance over the previously ruling Romanian Coven when she dispatched hundreds of them with her power alone. Moving on to number 23, there's probably no vampire I disliked more than Santiago from Interview with the Vampire, and it's enhanced so much more by Stephen Reeve's performance in the Neil Jordan movie. Santiago is a leading and influential figure in the Théâtre des Vampires, almost rivaling Armand for dominance and respect. Santiago was instrumental in the capture of Louis and Claudia due to their attempted murder of Lestat de Liancourt. He then pushed for and was successful with the execution of Claudia for her crimes and also for how young she was to be a vampire at 5 years old. He was extremely cunning and powerful, almost besting Louis, but he got his comeuppance in the end. Our number 22 on this list needs no introduction, but I kinda have to for the purpose of this video. Celine is the face of the Underworld series. The entirety of the universe is based around her journey, with a couple of really awesome movies to back that up. Selene originally began as a death dealer, before rising to becoming an elder of the new United Eastern Coven at the end of Blood Wars. She grew in power by consuming the blood of the extremely powerful immortal Alexander Corvinus, followed by transitioning into the spirit world with the help of Lena from the Nordic Coven. She is physically the most powerful vampire within the Underworld universe, and honestly I really struggled with her placement on this list. Following on, we have Hope Michelson coming in at number 21 from the Legacies series. The series I enjoyed just until the first 2 to 3 episodes, until I realised that they used the same recycled plotline for every single episode, for every single season. Yeah, that black goop and 8 million monsters. Anyway, we're placing Hope Michelson so high on this list because despite the show sucking, she is an extremely powerful tribrid, with the combined strengths of witchcraft, werewolf abilities and of course, vampire abilities. With all of these powers combined, Hope is a complete powerhouse. She can use a variety of spells, tap into her werewolf or vampire sides, and she acquired such a power from her hybrid father Klaus and her werewolf witch mother Hayley that there's not many that can stop Hope in her own universe. Moving on to number 20, we have The Master from The Strain. The Strain is a series I think is highly underrated, as is the antagonist The Master. One of the 7 Ancients, The Master broke away from the other 6 in order to mount an assault on the planet. His physiology is made up of whatever host body he takes, fueled by the parasitic worm that when entering the body, transforms it into a strigoi. He is fiercely strong, extremely fast and agile, and as I said, can jump from host to host if he pleases. His most powerful asset is his mind, as he targets the loved ones of his enemies, something he takes great pleasure in doing. He is, in my opinion, the ultimate vampire, as the portrayal of the vampires in The Strain really does show them as the bad guys, as if it's a plague. A nice change from the stereotypical heartthrob vampires we're so used to seeing. Coming in at number 19, we're moving on to a second Dracula rendition in Drake from Blade Trinity. Seen as the progenitor of the vampire race, he is over 5,000 years old and became so fed up with what vampires had become, placed himself into an indefinite slumber until he was awoken by Danica Talos and her team. Drake then set upon re-establishing the vampire's dominance by first attempting to destroy Blade, which obviously he failed to do so in the penultimate moments of the movie. He valued honour and worth in his opponents. He was unbelievably powerful, in addition to having the ability to shapeshift into a demon-like version of himself, further enhancing his already powerful abilities. Despite Blade Trinity flopping with critics, Drake was still a notable and iconic character. Next up we have Lord Ruthven, one of the oldest vampires to ever be created in the history of fiction. Lord Ruthven is the title character of the short story, The Vampire, argued to be the first ever publishing about the vampire race. Ruthven was genuinely thought to be evil, evident in his enjoyment at causing other people's ruin and degradation. He was basically the Dracula before Dracula, an unpolished version of the would-be Count. He brings kind of a sex appeal and alluring nature to the character. Quite early exposure to such traits for 1819, but also brings the sheer supernatural horror that comes with Dracula. Vlad Tepes is our 4th edition of Dracula following Lord Ruthven, and he comes in at number 17 on this list. Vlad was once a princely hostage held by the Ottoman Empire, where he learned to fight and participated in many battles, earning quite a famous reputation for his impalement of his victims. Upon returning home and seeing the impending threat, he sells his humanity in exchange for the power needed to stop the Ottoman Empire invading his lands. With this power, Vlad is able to eradicate dozens upon dozens of men with one quick swoop, while trying to resist the lust of human blood. Upon losing his wife to the Ottoman leader Mehmed, who has her thrown from a cliff, Vlad drinks her blood in her dying moments, unlocking further power, but forever confirming his existence as a vampire. Following on at number 16, we have the vampire Armand. How arrogant yet cool to have your title actually be the Vampire Armand. Anyway, Armand, formerly known as Amadeo and formerly also known as Andre before that, yeah, he had a couple of names, was the leader of the Théâtre des Vampires and had a quick, turbulent past. In fact, he probably has the most painful journey I've ever seen for a fictional vampire character. Armand was kidnapped by slavers, sold on, bought again by Marius de Romanus, turned into a vampire, kidnapped again by satanic worshipping vampires, brainwashed, and ended up running his own satanic group based in Paris. Yeah, he has had some story, some journey. He is extremely powerful and knowledgeable, appealing in particular to Louis de Pontelac, and if you read the book or watched my Armand video, then you'll know how that all went down. So guys, moving on, and we have the solo Mira Vampire Queen, who comes in at number 15, and she is from the Priest series. There's not much known about her background or any of the vampires' background in general, but there is certainly knowledge about her power. She stands at over 12 feet tall and controls the vampires of the Hive with her mind control. She created the first ever human-based vampire in Black Hat, who I mentioned earlier, and has operated in relative secrecy before once again launching an attack on the humans. I think it's a shame there was no sequel to Priest, as I would have loved to see her unleash her true power. Moving on, we have the Volori leader Arrow from Twilight coming in at number 14. Arrow is over 3,000 years old and can see every single thought a person has ever had by mere touch alone, which makes it impossible to lie to him. Despite his dormancy in fighting, his skill in battle is unquestionable due to the strength that comes with his age. His most powerful ability is his mind. Arrow seeks to collect the most gifted vampires across the planet and place them in his Volori ranks in order to secure the Coven's dominance across the globe. He will never let anything jeopardize the Volori, even going as far as killing his own sister to prevent her mate Marcus leaving with her. Next up at number 13, we have the vampire we all love to hate, then love again, in Klaus Michelson, one of the greatest characters to ever appear on screen and in a novel. Klaus is the self-proclaimed, although regularly enforced, leader of the Michelson family, the progenitors of the vampire race. Klaus's advantage is that not only is he an original vampire, but he's also half werewolf, which means he's immune to the fatally toxic werewolf venom, among having additional werewolf traits added to his vampire powers. Klaus also has a habit of daggering his siblings when they tend to disagree with him. He can't be killed by any normal means, is extremely unforgiving and cold, and would be a challenge for any vampire from any franchise to defeat. We're sticking with the Vampire Diaries universe for number 12, moving to the originals to discuss Marcel Gerard. Marcel was once Klaus's protege before rising to take over the New Orleans French Quarter after Klaus departed. Marcel outranks Klaus because he became an enhanced original vampire, making him the most powerful predator on the planet. Immune to all vampire weaknesses and even more unkillable than Klaus, Marcel used his power to finally assert complete dominance for his band of vampires. He is faster, stronger, more agile and more durable than any other vampire. Following on at number 11, we have Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, who actually only appears as a minor villain in the Dracula Untold movie. However, I can confirm that the planned sequel that was scrapped had the writers make a massive plan for this character. So why is he so high at number 11? Simple. He's the vampire who created Dracula. His powers weren't gained from consuming vampire blood. He sold his soul directly to a demon in order to acquire his powers. They come directly from the power of Satan. Dracula only had a taste of his powers, while Gaius Caesar was the true, original vampire. Next up, we have Vlad von Karstein, who leads the von Karstein vampire counts from Warhammer, and is one of the most notable antagonists in the story surrounding the setting's vampires. Coming in at number 10, he is the main villain in the first book of the Vampire Wars trilogy. He comes in at number 10 due to the sheer brutality of his power, which far surpasses what we normally see with vampires in general. He had the ability to convert those he inflicts with a blood kiss into a vampire should he desire it. He was a masterful practitioner of magic, often using necromancy to create giant hordes of animated skeletons, zombies and other types of undead to assist him during his battles. Strad von Zarovich is a major antagonist in the fantasy role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons. Coming in at number 9, he is an incredibly powerful vampiric necromancer and the unchallenged Dark Lord of the domain of Barovia, one of the domains of dread in the plane of shadow. After becoming a vampire with the help of the dark powers, Strad actually murdered his younger brother, Sergei, in order to claim his bride. Strad can change his form at will between that of a vampire, a wolf, a bat, or a cloud of smoke. He is relentless when pursuing his goals, and his power is basically unrivaled in the D&D universe. Next up we have one of the coolest, most popular vampire hunters of all time, Blade. Taking the number 8 spot, Blade is described as having all the vampire strengths and none of their weaknesses, due to the fact he was naturally born by his mother who was pregnant while turned into a vampire. He is not immune to the thirst that all vampires experience, however. Blade has a lifetime of training, knows every aspect of vampire anatomy and physiology inside out, and is considered the biggest threat to the vampire race. Definitely deserves his place on this list. Following on from Blade, we have probably the most powerful vampire in all of Helsing, Alucard, and he takes the number 7 spot, and for very good reason. Alucard is an extremely formidable and deadly opponent who can cut down most supernatural enemies without releasing the seals that contain his true power. He sometimes lets his opponents damage him, then regenerates as a way to taunt them. He demonstrates several unique abilities, as well as the ability to regenerate from virtually any injury. Superhuman strength, speed, durability, endurance. Alucard has it all and can even manipulate blood if he chooses to do so. Moving on to our number 6 spot, we have the Master from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If you're a 90s kid like me, then you will definitely remember how this guy came in and absolutely caused chaos, literally almost undefeatable. Entombed beneath Sunnydale for 60 years as the patriarch of a cult posed opposite Buffy, he is devoted to the vampire race's purpose to eradicate humanity and to fulfilling a prophecy that states he will kill the Slayer in the late 20th century, which is of course Buffy. The Master is centuries old, and despite being destined to kill Buffy, his main goal was to open the portal to hell below Sunnydale. So guys, we're down to the final 5, and we have who I'd rate as an incredible, powerful vampire in Lilith. She's appeared in multiple franchises such as True Blood, you know, that naked woman who walks around covered in blood, and also in 30 Days of Night, Dark Days, where she's the antagonist of that very disappointing sequel. She also appears in Supernatural. Lilith is believed to be the first vampire in existence and thought to be at least 11,000 years old. She's basically the Akasha of True Blood, praised by her children and profited to one day return. She's more ruthless and cunning in 30 Days, responsible for the vampires returning to Barrow, and is in a very high position of authority. Her ancient blood makes her near unstoppable, and I say near because, as with most extremely powerful antagonists, there's always a loophole to bring upon their death, and Lilith is no different. Moving on to number 4, it's gonna be Cain, the first of his kind and the oldest vampire in existence. At 14,000 years old, Cain's existence is heavily taken from biblical texts, but in the World of Darkness universe, his punishment for killing his brother Abel was to be turned into a vampire. Now Cain is literally the ultimate of ultimates in terms of how powerful he is as a vampire. Not only does he take 4th spot, but he'd be a candidate for top spot in power alone, were it not for the vampires that follow. He can control minds at will, he's impervious to almost all forms of harm, there is nobody faster than him, He can use blood magic to manipulate reality, and also has prophetic visions, which allows him to see the outcome of certain events before they happen. The Queen of the Damned herself, the Great Mother Akasha, the first ever vampire to exist in Anne Rice's fictional world, comes in at number 3. Akasha was once the Queen of Kemet and ruled alongside her husband King Enkil. That was until Akasha's soul merged with the spirit of Amel as she was dying, rendering her body and creating the first ever vampire in the process. She then turned Enkil into the first vampire fledgling, and together they drank the land dry. They drank until they lost the will to drink and became marble-like statues as a result of their protest in continuing to exist as the beings they were. Akasha rose in the 80s with a new goal, a new king in Lestat and a new lease on her life, something she had not experienced in thousands of years. You were probably wondering when Lestat was going to appear on this list, and he deservedly takes the number 2 spot. Lestat, in a way, kind of fast-tracked his way to power, growing more powerful in his relatively short vampire life than some of the oldest vampires in existence. He consumed Akasha's blood on multiple occasions, absorbing many of her traits and overall power, then went on to hold the sacred core, anchoring himself to every vampire in existence, and basically becoming the most powerful vampire of all time in the Chronicles universe. So guys, for our top spot we have, of course, Dracula. But it's not exactly what you might think, because it's not one Dracula, it's every Dracula. And by that I mean the sheer power of the vampire himself across all media. He's been portrayed countless times over the last century, in every way, shape or form. We've even had Dracula in space. We've had the legendary Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, Gary Oldman, Gerard Butler, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Luke Evans, just to name a few of many. The power of Dracula lies with his legacy. That is what makes him absolutely unstoppable, and that, my friends, is why he tops this list. There is no competition with the first vampire. So guys, if you disagree with this list, which I'm sure many of you will, let me know your list down below. Thanks for watching.